Tremors 5 Bloodlines takes place 25 years after the first movie, and 11 years after Tremors 4. Michael Gross was 78 when this released, but that's not going to stop him from being in it. Even as an old man, Burt Gummer is still a monster hunter. Right from the start, we're introduced to Burt. Really, there's no sense in prolonging the inevitable. You know that he's going to be the main character, so show him in the first scene. Here we see that he's now making survivalist videos. I'm not sure if it's for a TV show or YouTube or something like that, but this is what he does to make a living. Well, that and sell his own brand of marmalades. This intro is a good recap of the graboids, their abilities, and their evolutions, just in case you forgot. And then it's the opening credits, which we can see that this wasn't produced by Stampede Entertainment, the guys who made all the other Tremors stuff. In fact, the director hadn't even seen any of the other films until Michael Gross set him down to watch them. I don't know. That really doesn't instill much confidence in the director, but at least Gross made him watch all the other movies. Now we jump over to a whole nother continent. Most of this movie actually takes place in South Africa. We see two guys who are out farting around when one falls into a cave. How did he not see that giant hole in the ground? Well, as you might have guessed, he's not alone down here. And before his buddy can pull him up and out, something gets him. Back in Nevada, we see a guy riding around on a dirt bike, and it turns out that this guy's name's Travis, and he's Burt's new cameraman. He also has some ideas on how Burt can grow his brand, as his online presence is basically non-existent. While they talk, another guy shows up, Eric Van Wake, who claims to be with the South African Wildlife Ministry, and he says he needs Burt's help, because there's been a confirmed sighting of an ass blaster. But that's impossible. Burt managed to contain all the beasts to North America, but I guess not anymore. Burt's ready to go, but Travis works his magic as his new manager and gets Burt a sweet deal. Van Wake will fund his videos for 3 years. Over in Africa, Burt sees the footage of the ass blaster, but it doesn't look like anything he's ever seen before. Still convinced that they don't have a graboid problem. On the helicopter, Van Wake informs Burt that there was an issue at customs, and Burt doesn't have any of his weapons. So he's going to have to make do with what little they have. Red flag number one that Van Wake isn't who he says he is. Burt makes friends with the pilot, which is kind of uncharacteristic of Burt to make friends so easy, but hey, maybe old age is softening him up. They land and meet with the dude from the beginning who saw his friend get eaten, and he confirms it. He's 100% sure it was an ass blaster. They start talking about how to capture it alive, and that's when Burt informs them, no, there's no capturing these things, you kill them. But that doesn't seem to be the plan. Red flag number 2. Next, everyone heads over to the sanctuary, and we meet Dr. Nandi Montabu, the vet in charge of taking care of all of the animals. And she has a daughter who has an interesting way of using electricity to pull worms out of the ground. You better believe we're going to see that again. Just then we learn of another attack, and everyone rushes over to see it. This time, it was a couple of geologists who just unearthed a very interesting find. They were attacked while taking a shower, and boy do I hate it when that happens. And then the team gets there to see all the carnage that's left over, and a giant graboid fossil. So they now know, yeah, they have a graboid problem, and they're in trouble. And that night, trouble rears its ugly head, in the form of an ass blaster. Two guys are working on a car when it attacks, and we get our first look at it. And, well, this isn't an ass blaster, but maybe it's the African variety, so I'll give it a pass. They fight it for a bit, and it ends up taking this guy and dumping him on a bridge. Burt goes to try to save him because somehow he's still alive, but it looks like he was just bait, and Burt's the fish. The ass blaster swoops down and takes the bait away. Burt shooting at it, but apparently he misses. That's okay. He won't miss with the machete. Back at the main office, Burt informs everyone of the situation, and every able-bodied man and woman gets a gun to go out and hunt this thing until they're all destroyed. It doesn't take long before they find one. They shoot at it with a tranq dart, which really only pisses it off. It flies up into the air, and Burt ends up taking it out, which upsets Van Wake. Why does he want one alive so badly? But all Burt can think about is why it didn't attack them when they were using flares to get its attention. But then he spots it. Graboid eggs. They were protecting the nest. Van Wake gets his hands on one, and that's when his true colors shine through. He's not with the South African Wildlife Ministry at all. He's a poacher. And if he can't get his hands on an ass blaster, he might as well take an egg. Van Wake forces Burt into a cage and leaves him there to bake in the hot African sun, which, to say the least, takes a toll on Burt. Finally, Travis shows up. Haven't seen Burt on a camera, and he knew he needed help, but I guess just to be a jerk, instead of saving him, he takes him for a ride. The dude's 68 years old, just let him out of the cage. But was Travis's little stunt worth it? Because now the fuel line's busted, so they're stranded. Luckily, there's a lot of rock around, so they can hide out on it, just in case the graboids decide to attack. And here's where they spot Van Wake's truck. So he didn't make it too far, but no sign of the criminal just yet. Back at the vet's office, we see that they have their own problems. The only people left on site are Nandi, her daughter, and Baruti, who wants to get into Nandi's pants. Baruti and the girl escape from an ass blaster, and they hide out in the kitchen. And I'm really starting to get some serious Jurassic Park vibes here. No way this is just a coincidence. Too bad Ariana Richards isn't in this movie. Anyway, they have a close call, but in the end are saved by Nandi, who looks like Tomb Raider. I guess she knows her way around a bow and arrow. Back to Burt, and he does see Van Wake running in the desert. Even though he's a bad guy, Burt still tries to save him by telling him to get to the rocks. But it's no use, because the worms have another trick up their sleeves. Remember the graboids' tongues? Well, they can now detach, and they're basically snakes. Burt tries to take them out, but the ground starts to shake, and Mama's coming home. It jumps up into the air and takes out Van Wake. So he's dead. Burt wonders what other tricks these African variants have up their sleeves, mentioning that the Shriekers haven't happened yet, which unfortunately we never get to see in the entire movie. Burt finally is able to put it all together, and he now knows that these monsters are protecting the cave, and that must be where the nest is. Graboid Ground Zero. Destroy the cave, destroy the nest. But how are they going to do it? Travis wanders in, fully armed with Burt's arsenal, and he finds the eggs. But before he can make an omelet, he's chased out and forced to use the only grenade at the entrance, which doesn't take out the eggs. Outside, Burt knows he needs some help, so he calls the helicopter pilot to lend them a hand. Soon enough, he shows up, but the chopper's making an awful lot of noise, and it attracts a graboid. His co-pilot's taken out, and despite both Burt and the pilot pumping lead into the monster, it takes out Burt's new friend. That doesn't change the fact that they still have to make it to the helicopter, and they have a plan to do it, using the local cattle as a distraction, knowing that if they ran through them, the graboid wouldn't be able to tell who's who and would hopefully only attack the cows. Their plan works, and they make it safe and sound. They figure out how to fire the rockets, aim, and shoot at the cave, a direct hit, blowing up all the eggs. Good news. More good news is that the pilot's still alive. Yeah, the graboid spit him out when he wouldn't stop shooting her from the inside. So now Burt's not the only person to be eaten by a graboid and live to tell the tale. That works out too, because Burt and Travis don't know how to fly. Back to Nandi and her group, who once again get attacked by yet another ass blaster. Why do they keep targeting them? Well, they manage to make it to a truck, but something big is coming. The two come up with a plan, which basically entails lighting a car on fire, waiting for the worm to attack, and then blowing up the gas tank. An elaborate, yet effective way to take out a graboid. That's the thing about these movies. They're always coming up with unique ways to kill the same monster. Anyway, we go back to the guys for a second, and Travis drops a bombshell. He's Burt's son. That's right. In the 70s, Burt went to Florida to a gun show where he met Travis's mom. After a couple days, they went their separate ways, and Burt never heard from her again. So, yeah, Travis is Burt's kid, I guess. Now we see Nanda and her daughter, and more importantly, what she's holding, the last graboid egg. So that's why they've been hunting her down. A little later, they're all back at the main village when Burt and Travis show up to see her surrounded by graboid tongues. Travis hops on his dirt bike to make a distraction while Baruti gets the girl. Once she's saved, Burt and Travis take out the tongues. There's only one graboid left, but it won't go down without a fight. Travis keeps it busy while the rest work on a trap. A storm's coming in, and they plan on using the lightning to pull the graboid out of the ground and then open fire, just like the worms in the beginning. Once they're ready, Travis leads it back, and wham! Lightning cracks down from the sky. The worm explodes up from the ground, and they open fire. Between that and the electricity, the final graboid blows up, and the egg is fried. Nandy and Baruti get together, and Burt and Travis team up to continue making more survival videos. And that was Tremors 5 Bloodlines. And now that you know who Travis is, the subtitle Bloodlines kind of makes more sense, doesn't it? I don't know how I feel about Travis being Burt's son. I get that they were trying to think long term for someone to replace Burt, but just to make up some story about a random girl he slept with and never talked about, I mean, it happens, but still, it felt shoehorned in. I kind of wish they would have at least mentioned the other citizens of Perfection, and what El Blanco's been up to. But other than that, the story was pretty good. I like that it took place in Africa, where it would make sense that these things are bigger and meaner, and I guess that's why they look so different. This was 2015. I knew the days of monster puppets were over, and honestly, the CGI here looks great, but they almost completely changed the looks of these things. For better or for worse is your opinion, and I can see points on each side, but for me, I'm more a fan of the classic look. They also tried to make a love triangle with Nandy, Baruti, and Travis that didn't really work. It might sound like I'm complaining a lot and that I didn't like the film, but that's not true. It actually was really good and a worthy reboot to the series. The acting was good, the music was good, and it still feels like a Tremors movie at heart. And for that reason, I give it 3 Old Man Burts out of 4.
Didn't you see this gigantic hole?